Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Cripple Toast 5 coming at you again. This time with a little bit more of a um, subject that is close to home, bullying or harassment, whatever you wish to call it. It's a very, very serious thing. It's happening so often in schools now that we turn our back to it. Those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s and maybe earlier than the 70s, we never really experienced it. Was a face-to-face endeavor. And I use the term very loosely. It's a face-to-face encounter where someone would use, you know, certain terminologies for your disability. They would, in my case, they would call me four eyes, crippled, and so on. And this is an issue that's only gotten worse over time. In the respect that now, the digital age has come to fruition, and it's 2026, and bullying started becoming digital probably in the early 2000s, and it only became worse over time. And there's a simple solution to suppressing this, at least, because you can't stop it. But teaching people, especially kids these days, how to use this technology as a tool and not a toy or a weapon, because digital harassment can be sometimes worse than physical, um, especially with those whom have severe disabilities. You know, my you know my, my myself included, um, and especially with mine being neurological, the uh, the fact that I at times have a seizure, and if they were convulsive when I was young, they would have severely uh, had they would have had the time of their lives in essence, because this is physical, face to face harassment. Of course, you can't arrest somebody for calling someone else a jerk or anything of that nature. I mean, these are kids. They're gonna, think how they think, and they're gonna be, I mean, kids of any age, especially when you get up into the teens, can be very, very cruel. Um, and it's gotten to a point now where we just turn our back on it, and it's so severe that people have stepped off the stage, shall I say? Um, and I'm hoping all of you understand what I mean by that analogy. And I've come across several news stories of such behavior, and I think it very, very sickening. But kids aren't being taught how to defend themselves physically; they're not being taught how to psychologically defend themselves, and that within itself arises another problem. And the main problem I see, especially, is that schools aren't rewarding kids for defending themselves at all. If I had kids, which I do not, and my son or daughter came home and said, "Dad, um, I had to dislocate this person's elbow because they were harassing me and they wouldn't quit," I would congratulate them as far as defending themselves, and I'd say, "You know what? We're going to deal with this suspension later because the schools aren't doing their jobs properly. They're neglecting these kids. They are abusing them to a degree." Now, I use that term very loosely in the respect that these quote unquote counselors aren't doing their jobs. The teachers aren't protecting these kids. They're just in it for the money, and they're not truly caring about them. And so that creates a problem. In that, I think family and friends should be uh, part of their lives, and helping them understand themselves, especially those with disabilities. I mean, I have a very dear friend of mine who I've known ever since, you know, I was 7 or 8 years old, who understood who I was and accepted me for who I was almost instantly. And so I think that needs to be part of these kids' lives more often than not. Um, and it's a hard thing to navigate that road. You don't really know what a friend is until you're quite a bit older. You know, probably in your early to mid teens, you come to realize what a friend is. And in that perspective, these ladies and gentlemen will, defend you. They'll help you. Um, and as a community, all of us can come together and say, okay, well, how can this issue be suppressed, and how can it be, quote unquote, dealt with um, in a way that won't really harm anybody, but will educate them concerning disabilities. Um, and disability education and disability advocacy are very hard to do. Even folks like myself, who at 44, I don't know how to, I myself don't know how to suppress this thing, because you cannot legally arrest a kid for speaking their mind, because they're still learning, their minds are still developing. The human mind doesn't start developing until the age of 25. And so they're still learning, and that's where the parents come into play. And I've come across several stories in the past of kids exiting the stage, and I'm hoping you understand that terminology about what I mean, which it is very, very unfortunate that they made that choice. Um, but when I hear about it and see this, um, and these kids that are doing this, saying, okay, well, this is because of bullying in schools, I myself would call foul on that one, partially because it is the family's job to help these kids, to teach them to defend themselves psychologically and physically. I think self-defense is more important, and a human life is more important than a school suspension, because school suspensions, and this education system is fractured now that it cannot be repaired. Period. Um, and so kids aren't really allowed to be kids anymore. They can't really. I think I read a story years ago about schools, when this is elementary schools, eliminating a, a the time for recess, which is a physical break from schools. For half an hour to an hour, possibly an hour and a half. Let kids be kids, in the sense that let them release that energy physically, and all of a sudden now they're going to be a little bit more attuned to what they're doing academically. Secondly, let the teachers respond and act concerning the bullying, because if they don't, who will? And I think, rewarding that student for defending themselves is a very good idea. Now, I'm not saying that kids should resort to physical violence. Not at all, no. They should only fight back when absolutely necessary. Just a moment, please. Pardon the interruption. Um, but, you know, enforce the fact that kids, you know, teachers, kids are going to be kids, and understand that, and let the teachers and the schools reward these kids for defending themselves and punish those if they can find them who are starting the harassment, and let these kids who are being harassed finish it. And what I mean specifically is defending themselves to the point where one or two things happen. One, this person leaves you alone, or two, they ask that that's hey, they apologize for the bullying, and they say, okay, I'm sorry for treating you the way I did. Can you help me understand what you go through? And therein lies the educational aspect. But once again, I sincerely appreciate your time, and comments are more than welcome. I would sincerely appreciate your feedback. Also, if you would hit the like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. You can just leave a comment below about contacting me on any sort of video conferencing program that's available, and I'd be more than willing to talk with you. But anyhow, Crippled Tales 5, signing off for the time being. I appreciate it. Thank you.